And welcome back to the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, maybe grilling, maybe cleaning, maybe doing chores, who knows what you're doing? Maybe you're finally working on the honey to do list. I don't know, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jay. Super excited to be with you once again today. I'm not sure what day of the week it is, not sure what time of year it is. So that's why I say all the things. Maybe you're shoveling snow. I don't know. But welcome into the show, regardless. Like I said, I'm Jay. I'm your host. Welcome to the Young Dad Podcast. I'm a little rusty with the intros because it's been a little bit since I've done like a full intro. Lately, it's just been a jump straight into the conversation and try to introduce the show a little bit later. So it's really fun to try to get back greasing the wheels again. So before I jump into the intro of my amazing guest that I have with me today, James, I do want to just shout out the Podbeat app. The music you heard from this morning is not this morning, from the beginning of the show. Wow, I'm all over the place. That's fine. Music you heard at the beginning of the show, that is the lo-fi mellow beat from the Podbeat app. You can download the Podbeat app absolutely for free. You can follow the link in the show notes or the description of this episode. Download Podbeat and enhance your podcasting experience to a musical one. You can also do the same with audiobooks. So if you like to add a little extra beat, a little extra a little extra something to a podcast, then Podbeat has you covered. So without further ado, James, welcome to the show. First and foremost, you have a story that the listeners are not going to want to miss. It is truly unique, it's truly incredible, and it's really just inspiring nonetheless. Just reading little snippets about it. But you've gone from being a successful attorney to facing the depths of despair as a compulsive gambler and serving time in federal prison. But that's not where the story ends, right? If you were still in federal prison, I don't think we would be speaking. But that's not where the story ends. You turned your life around, becoming a pastor, author, and source of inspiration for so many. Through your books, Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity Blown, and Deal by Me Second Edition, A Self-Evaluation, James, you share the lessons that you learned about self-reflection, resilience, and redemption. Today, we're here to talk about confronting fear, finding second chances, and inspiring others to get out of the ditch and back on the road to success. So, James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be with you. I am always thrilled when get a chance to share my story.
I
So
love it.
I'm open for any comments, questions. I always say I'm an open book. So whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to ask me, please feel free to ask me, and we'll move forward.
Hello. Well, I think today our conversation, I'm not sure where it's going to go, how it's going to happen. I just kind of let the powers that be as they are. But I think your story is truly going to resonate with our listeners today because it's one that everyone's always looking for a second chance, right? Everyone's always looking for kind of their redemption arc, or a lot of people are in that place to where they're looking for that redemption arc. How they can kind of come back from where they were beaten down and whatnot, and hear inspiring stories of hope and how people did it. So I really want to understand or get to know your story a little bit. So you had a successful law career. So how did gambling derail your life?
Well, let me kind of take you from the beginning, and I
Please.
think it will give you a better um aspect of who I am. I was a little country lawyer who grew up in a small town, Lewisburg, North Carolina, and of course went off to uh, college and went to law school. Finished law school under combined program, so I got out at in 6 years from law school. Started practicing law in my hometown. The youngest and only African American practicing in my hometown, the youngest African American at that time practicing law in the state of North Carolina. I kind of got to the point with a couple of other professionals who were gambling, and I started playing poker, and that's kind of where that ends. And of course, as a result of all of this, I lost my property wife of 5 years, and I separated, and of course I did a crazy thing. Went into a bank and robbed a bank. Got a 15-year sentence, and I spent 5 years in prison. I got out in 1986, and from there I began pulling my life back together. Started I went back to school, as a matter of fact, got my seminary degrees, Master of Divinity, Doctor of Ministry, and of course, called to my church that I've now retired from after 32 years. And and of course, stayed retired for about 7 months. And my home church lost her pastor abruptly as a result of a heart attack at 6 or 7 years of age. And so they called me to come down and help them out. I was supposed to be down there for just a few months. I've now been down there for 16 months. So that's kind of where we are. I remarried. So my beautiful, lovely wife, we've been married now. This year, July, will be 35 years. Two beautiful kids, two beautiful grands. And so that's my story. Now I'm open for any other dialogue that you might want to ask, or there are questions that you might want to ask. I'm ready to answer them and move forward.
That's incredible. So, law career to gambling to armed bank robbery to 5 years in prison to then coming out, turning it around. That's incredible. That's that's so cool to hear. When you were going through the gambling addiction, I think that's something that I wanna go through just a little bit here because it's so common today, right? The gambling, and it looks different than probably back then a little bit when you were gambling, the poker and whatnot. But now it looks there's still poker, there's still casinos and things like that, right? High stakes tables. But now there's also sports betting. That's all over the place. It's very common. DraftKings, sports books, draft betting. You can just log into your phone, jump on. It's advertised on so many podcasts. One thing I learned, I don't know who I learned it from. I want to say from an uncle or from my dad. I'm not sure. Remember who? Maybe a grandpa. But they said don't ever try to understand what an over under is. Don't understand what an over under is. Don't understand what a plus minus is. Don't understand what all those things different mean. Now, just over time, being a sports fan, I understand those a little bit more just from listening to podcasts and whatnot. But I still don't truly get it. I don't sports bet or anything myself. But when you were in that gambling and starting out that gambling, when did you know, or did you know while you were in it, that you were in some form of addiction?
Well, I thought that. Now, let me kind of tell you, bring that, I guess, full circle. I thought I was a compulsive gambler. Okay. And I wasn't, as a matter of fact, in my first book that I wrote, that's what I put everything, said that I was a compulsive gambler because I thought I had gotten there. Okay. But after I got out and wanted to start doing some work with helping people who going through some situations like gambling, alcoholism, or whatever it might be, I called to a group in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. It was a gambling anonymous house. And I told them that I had been, gambling and I knew a lot about it. I would like to come over and talk with the guys, females, whoever it is, about gambling or what it can do to you. And the first thing he asked me was, "Are you still a compulsive gambler?" And now note, I got out when this happened to me in 1981. I went to the mental hospital for a 3 weeks observation. And it was at the mental hospital that my faith kicked in, and I said, anything that caused this to happen to me, I'm finished with it. That's when I gave up. I never gamble anymore. I stopped my drinking, maybe a social glass of wine or some of that, so out with my friends or what have you. Nothing of that sort. I was finished. And so when he asked me, was I still a compulsive gambler? I said, no, I don't have the urge for it, nothing of that nature. And so he told me that, well, I don't think the guys would appreciate hearing from you because we believe that once a compulsive gambler, always a compulsive gambler. So I'm trying to set the stage to you where I am now.
I hear you.
And so what I started thinking about was that maybe I was not a compulsive gambler, but I was probably more in the area of afraid to fail. I had been the youngest lawyer in my hometown, youngest lawyer in the state of North Carolina at the time. I was an awesome attorney. I mean, if you talk to anybody in North Carolina who knew me at the time, they would tell you that. And now I am feeling lost my properties, lost my wife, and I'm thinking now that my problem was I wanted I was afraid to fail, and I thought that what I did, I could recoup, get back into my law practice, start all over again, but that's just not the way it worked. And so in my second book, that's what I wrote about, what I talked about, Deal by Me, a second edition, a self-evaluation, because I did a self-evaluation of my whole life and try to pull everything in perspective. So I know where you are, and I don't want to say that you're wrong in terms of the gambling, but I know I'm not a compulsive gambler because I have not dealt with that and have not had the urge for that
Okay.
since 1981. You understand where I'm
I hear
coming
you.
from?
I hear
Okay.
you. I hear
Okay.
you. Because I think in those programs they're very similar. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of professionals that work in recovery, and it's one of those you have to accept that you have the issue. Like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic kind of thing.
Hmm.
That's a
Hmm.
big AA thing, to where you accept it. You accept that okay, I was once this. I'm always going to be this, but that's part of my journey and my recovery. Because it's going to be very easy to slip back into that, right? I think that's the difference between the depth of addiction and like the compulsiveness here is that you can very easily just like slip. You still have that desire, and if you slip, you slip kind of, and that can be really hard for a lot of people. So I was just curious there, but to getting into the gambling, was it just being young, successful? Were those things some of the driving factors there? Oh, I'm
Oh yeah.
untouchable. I'm
Oh yeah.
bulletproof.
Oh yeah, sure. No question about that. You were making the money. You were around the other professionals who were out there gambling. We never worried about the money. If I lost one night, if my other professional bondsman or the barber or whoever was that were gambling, other older, we knew we can borrow the money. If I needed $500, I could get it. If I was winning that night and they needed $500,000, they could get it. I mean, that's just the way we played.
Okay.
So that was what we were, and that was fun. But at some point, I think it, I began to love the game more than I did when I first started. When I first started, you know how to, if you lose, 1,000 and you don't want to lose anymore, you know how to get up. You follow what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you get to a point where you love it and you start borrowing from here, from your friends, you borrow from this. And that's what happened to me. So then I was losing, then I lost my wife, I lost my properties that I had accumulated. And then I went down. And when I felt that I had lost all of that, in hindsight, now, it's my pride, it's my law practice that I'm going down, that I'm losing. And I already had this reputation of being the first, only, and everybody's looking at me. So I
Yeah.
don't want to lose it. And I think now as I look at it, that's what happened. And that's what I kind of reflect on in my second book. So
I
you're
agree.
correct. You're right about about the gambling. That's how I got to the point because I didn't it was I started getting I really loved the game. So I played it. I mean every weekend. I went to a gambling session. We had friends who we kind of rotated from one place to house to another. It was like a social club, that with food was there, wives or girlfriends will have a spread. I mean, you eat, you can go to sleep if you want to for a while. You wake up, you can get back into the poker game. I mean, it was just fun.
Yeah.
And that's what we were doing. But I got to the point where the love of the game became more important than our really socializing it when we first
Yeah.
began.
Like the game became your mistress,
Yeah,
more or less.
exactly.
It became your
Exactly.
mistress, and then you fell in love with your mistress versus staying faithful to your wife kind of thing.
Exactly. No question. Mhm.
And that makes sense. So with the gambling and whatnot, I forgot what I was going to say there, but it's very easy to get comfortable and all that, right? You get comfortable, like man, it feels good, right? It
Mm-hmm.
feels good. You're giving those dopamine
Mm-hmm.
hits to the brain, and
Mm-hmm.
you're feeding that to yourself. I have won. Yeah. Oh no, I'm gonna win. When I win, oh, that feels so good. When I win, I get a little extra money, kind of thing. Oh, that feels so good, kind of thing. But was there anyone like along the way throughout this process, like throughout the borrowing money and when it really was starting to consume you a little bit, that was just like, hey, James, I'm gonna loan you this money, but you see you have an issue. There's no one, no like voice of reason.
No, nobody was doing that because nobody gave the impression that things would get into them.
Or was it just because you were running just the money in that circle? So those
Ex-
same
ex-
people. Okay, okay, so that makes sense. So everyone's kind of like, yeah, you're good, dude, you're good.
Exactly, exactly. And they know that, and they knew that the next week we came back together. If you owe somebody $500, you give it right to them. Time you walk in, they got the money. It was never an issue like that. And and if you went outside and borrowed some money, they didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm trying to say? It was like everybody within the circle was okay. We worked with each other. We're just having fun.
So everyone was kind of in that situation. It was kind of in a circle to where everyone's doing the same things. Everyone doesn't see anything wrong with it. Everyone's just kind of, yeah, yeah, you're great. Don't worry about it. Like, you're great. Like, don't worry. And kind of trying to justifying and enabling each other's behavior.
Exactly. That's
Okay,
exactly right.
gotcha. Question here: were you raised in a faith at all? Like
Well,
growing up?
oh yeah, oh yeah. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. My mom was a very committed uh, Christian. She took me to church. I was in church all the time. Even when I would start practicing law, I would still go to church. And sometimes even when I was gambling, because after my wife and and when we were separated, and before we separated, I would try to leave the gambling uh, house where we were gambling. We rotated, it was at friends'
Yeah,
houses
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. I would leave like early on a Sunday morning and tell the guys, "Don't y'all go nowhere, because I'll be back." I had to go back to pick my mom up and take her to church, and we'll go to church. And it was over. I head back down to the poker game.
I hear you.
I went to poker games. I leave the office, my law practice, when we closed down about 5 o'clock, and I would head. My next trip would be straight to where we had our next poker game. Well, because when we left one, we knew where the next one was going to be,
Yeah, of
and we
course.
we and we
Set it
rode
up and
we rotated from town to town. We had about 5 different cities that we were going. And so when we left here, I knew I was going to Wilson. When we left Wilson, we know we were coming to Durham. We left Durham, we know we was coming to Henderson. From Henderson, we knew we was going to Warren. I mean, that's just the way we
yeah, I
we
hear
did
you.
it, and it was just so much fun. I mean, I we loved it. We were having fun. I mean, and when you're in that environment, it's like you're playing the poker, but at the same time there are drinks up there on the bar. There's a spread that the female wife or either the girlfriend or whatever has fixed. So you got the chicken, you got the ham. I mean, you got everything. You
Making my mouth
eat.
water, man. That sounds so delicious.
So you're eating, you're getting a drink. If you get tired, you got a nice big sofa there. You sit back on, you relax, and you lay your head back, and you get your hour, 2 hours of sleep. Somebody else done took your seat, but when you wake up, somebody else is tired. You get back into the poker game. I mean, this is just the way it was, and it was just everybody was talking. Everybody was talking about their profession. Bondsman would be talking about, gee, man, this guy that he let out, how he had to run somebody down. My other lawyers will be talking about the cases that they had. We all do, and it was just
Everyone was socializing. Everyone having
yeah,
fun, having a good time. No, it
it
makes
was
sense.
just it was
Makes sense. So then your wife at the time, your first wife there, she was like she was a part of it then. So she didn't see anything. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the company.
no, she never wanted me to. to
Okay.
poker. As a matter of fact, we had my arrangement with my wife because she didn't particularly like it. She, because I was out all the time. Okay, and what I used to tell her, I would tell her, I said, "Honey, don't worry about it." And this is part of maybe part of my problem. Also, I will tell her, I said, "Don't worry about it." I say, I'm just out with the guys. Because she sometimes they think you're out, doing something else. I
Yeah.
said I'm out with the guys, and we just having fun. So she said, but you need to come on home or something like that sort. And I said, I tell you what I'm gonna do. Let's make a bargain. I say, whatever I win, I'm gonna give you half of it. Okay. I say, no, this is what we did. I said, whatever I win, I'm gonna give you half of it. And I said, whatever if I lose, I'm gonna give you half of what I lose. Okay. That was a good bargain for her, all right? Problem with that is that if I won, and to give you an example, if I won $1,000, I really would come home and give my wife $500, okay? But if I lost $1,000, I might would tell my wife I only lost $200. You follow me? And I gave her $100. You follow what I'm saying?
I hear you.
Yeah, so that's the way that ball went. But either way, she didn't know anything about all of this, and she just went on with me and went on with me until it got to the point where I was really going downhill because I had fallen in love with the game. I started not knowing how to get up when I should have gotten up. I started putting my properties up for money on my properties, and then finally foreclosure, this type of stuff, and that's what happened, you know.
I hear you. And so that's the reason I wanted to dive into that. Just so I wanted our listeners to hear, if you're in this cycle, if you feel like you're caught in this cycle of gambling and the addiction, and maybe it's leading to compulsion and whatnot, kind of what that looks like. And that's why, I kind of poke it and prod in there a little bit more. But the common things, there was a lot of justification back then for you,
Mhm.
right? Justify. Do you find ways to justify the I guess we can relate it to justifying it, to sin. Like, you justify the sin, right? You find ways to be okay with it. Oh yeah, well, I'm still gonna wake up on Sunday and go to church. Or, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna bargain with my wife to kind of keep her happy, keep her quiet. And we find ways. Oh man, it's just so much fun, and I'm just with the guys, and it's just so fun, kind of thing. And we find ways. We're humans, right? We find ways to justify our sins and what we're doing wrong. And that's common. That's very common to everybody. We all do it. We all done it. Ain't no one different. So then you're gambling. 1981, you go to the mental hospital for a few weeks. You're able to separate from that addiction a little bit. The desire is gone. Essentially, God takes it from you. But then, what led you to an armed bank robbery? So you're going from a successful law career. You're the youngest, sharpest, slickest African American lawyer out there, North Carolina. You're absolutely crushing it. Fall into this gambling. You start to lose everything: property, wife, marriage, everything. I'm sure there was friends that lost along the way too. You lost everything essentially. But then, what led? Were you just in a place of despair and needing money, and it can't get any worse? I might as well, kind of thing. What led you to doing an armed bank robbery?
Okay, let me bring you back now. The mental hospital was after the bank robbery.
Oh, okay. So I skipped that. I skipped the robbery
Yeah,
part. Okay.
yeah. The mental hospital was after the bank robbery.
Okay.
What happened with the bank robbery was to the point I think I tried to clear it as much as I could, is that you just felt like you didn't have another way out. I had lost everything. My law practice, I saw it going, leaving me. I didn't feel like I was going to make it. The first thought was not the bank robbery. The first thought was suicide. I went to my office with my uh, 22 pistol, and I was going to take my life. I just had gotten to that point where I just felt like it was over. I lost everything. My wife and I've separated. I've lost properties, lost my home. Everything was gone, and so I just didn't think it was worth it. And when I was sitting in my office contemplating it, the only thing that kept me from doing it was my mom. I had no children. We didn't have any children, so it was just my mom. I'm a only child to a single mom. Okay, so and I start wondering what was my mom going to do. Well, that wasn't right for me to do this, and the other things that was going through my mind. So I abandoned that thought and got in my car and started riding around, just thinking. It was on a Wednesday morning. I never will forget it. Just thinking and just trying to clear my head. And I got on 85 and just start riding. Now I have to admit there were a couple of times even on 85 that I thought about stopping abruptly in front of a big transfer truck. Just I figured that would if that happened, I had practiced law, so I felt like, my mom would be in good shape then, she would be able to get some good money from the accident or what have you, and would have been anything to worry about. But in the final analysis, things start to run through your mind. You don't want to get maimed. It may not take your life, so now you're walking around, maimed and all this type of stuff. So I continued and I went into a restaurant in another city that was close by. And while I was sitting there eating, a couple of lawyers that I knew came in and ate there, but we were just talking. And then when they left, I was still sitting there just meditating. I mean, my mind was it was just like I was out of space. You're not focusing. And I looked out of the window, and that was the CCB Bank, Central Carolina Bank. And then my mind started just roving, to the point where, why, if I could just get in there and get me 50, $100,000, and that's what I was thinking at the time. I could take care of all my debts, I pay off everybody, and I could get back into my practice and things would be totally different. Now I know that's crazy now. Okay, so I'm not don't
I don't really don't think that that's crazy though. I
okay.
really don't, because all things considered, and here's why. All things considered, you're at the lowest of lows, right? You're in massive debt, probably more than you ever been in your life.
Mhm.
You are losing your practice, so you're losing your purpose essentially, right?
Mhm.
Or you've lost your purpose
Yeah.
of being a husband and practicing law and everything. Like, you lost your purpose. Very common. You're having these thoughts of ending your life in very common ways for men. Men will look for a kind of a one, if it has to work first time kind of thing. Very common for men, right? And so you're young, you hadn't dealt with anything like this before. It all came crashing down. It all went up in flames, essentially, crashing down, whatever you want to say. So for me, it makes sense. I work in mental health. So for me, from my perspective, it makes sense, because of all
Okay.
things considered, the factors at play is really not that crazy, because you're trying to think of, you're trying to find a way out.
Okay.
You just want a way out. You want some peace. You want to fix things. Like, we're men, we always want to fix things. We want to, find a solution, and we want to fix, and fix it quickly. We don't want to wait around, right?
Mhm.
Like the other night, this is just kind of a fun example here to kind of add a little bit of lightheartedness. My wife bought this little bathroom stand off of Amazon, and it came Monday, and I had like 20 minutes, maybe less than 20 minutes before me and the kids had to go somewhere. We go to a church program every Monday night, and I had like 20 minutes. I just want to do this thing like right now, get it done, and try to piece it together. The instructions didn't make sense, and it's like a little puzzle piece thing. I'm like, I don't. This thing doesn't make sense. This is dumb. Um, and I'm piecing it together real quick, and I'm like, I think this is right. I really don't know. And then I put it all together. I had it all set up right, but I didn't put the screws in. And I'm like, I promise I will put these screws in the second I get home. Pretty much like 5 minutes after walking in the door later that night, I put it all together and fixed it. I'm like, here you go, it's done, kind of thing. Wash my hands of it, walk away. So just kind of the highlight, like, we want to fix things. We want to put a solution on things. We want to put a bow on it, walk away. I'll be done, kind of thing. And it's in that situation to where you just wanted to be done. You wanted to wipe out your debt. You wanted to get your practice back. You wanted to try to get your life back on track. So your purpose for doing it, it sounds like, was to get back on track. You weren't trying to do it to harm anyone. You didn't want to hurt nobody. You just want to get some money real quick and pay off your debts and get back to, rebuilding your reputation, things like that. And, back to a normal, quote unquote, life.
Okay, I buy that. I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I guess I'm looking at it from where I am now, and
Of
say,
course, yeah.
"Hey, that was a crazy thing for me to do. But I see where you are at that point. That may have made sense. So I follow you. I do.
Thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense to people listening too. Like if they're in this and maybe they're in this cycle, maybe this podcast, finds that person that's like, man, I just gotta find a way out. I gotta find a way out. I gotta do something. Do I go? We had someone that was like here where I live in Tri Cities in Washington, probably about a year ago, but he was an older gentleman. I think he was in his 60s or something. He goes and does an armed robbery of a bank. So it's like the point of that desperation. It affects people. It's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
It's very real. And so I just want to highlight that like there could be someone listening to this. I'm just do I in my life? Do I go do something crazy? Like what do I do? Kind of thing. So yeah. So you're sitting there. You look across the street at the bank, and you're like, I'm gonna go get some money and do this kind of thing. So then what was next there?
Well, the next thing, having thought about it and then coming to the conclusion that maybe that's how I can get this money to take care of what I need to take. I still couldn't quite build myself to do it. It was just like, I can't do that. But I left, started riding around in the city, and the overpowering of the situation was like, well, heck, get caught or not. That was a thought that hit me. And when that hit me, I just said, shoot, it doesn't matter. I drove right up to the front of the bank with my car, jumped out, went in, and say, stick up, give me your money. They threw a bag of money over. I got the money, ran out, got in the car, and took off. And from there on, the story gets very interesting, and I'll share that with you. This could be a little laugh for you. I get about maybe about half a mile from the bank, and obviously they whatever they put into the bag that caused the explosion. And yeah,
The
okay,
Yeah,
and
I know
my
what you're talking about.
yeah, and the car started shaking, you know, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And so I pulled to the side, I stopped, and I looked back in the back seat where I had thrown the money and realized that it had exploded and the bag was there and smoke, the fumes were all in the car. So I got out and took the bag of money and threw it out across the field. Got back into the car and the fumes were so heavy until it made me start crying. And so I let the window down a little bit, let everything kind of out. And I was sat there for a while. And actually, obviously, my eyes were running, crying. And probably about too many minutes afterwards, a police officer from Oxford who knew me, because a lot of things we don't have time to talk about, but I was very prominent and was well known. I'd run for district court judge in the 5 county area. So the police officers in the different counties knew me very well. Matter of fact, the law had been like it is now. I would have been the first African American lawyer to win a district court seat back in 1976. So I mean that's where we were going. So then he came up to my car and recognized me, and he said, "Lawyer." I said, "Yes," and he could tell that I was stressed out and my eyes was running water. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think so. I think I'll be all right." He said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah," and he let me go. He said, "Okay, go ahead on." I started the car up, pulled off, and I probably went another mile, and I got stopped again. And when I got stopped this time, it was by the highway patrol. And I just knew that was it. I knew they had figured out who it was and all this type of stuff. The highway patrol sit behind me for a while, trying to figure out stuff. I assume I didn't know what it was then, but later I thought that what he was doing was checking my license tags. And it was interesting because he perhaps didn't know if the car was stolen because I was doing so bad at that time until my insurance, my uncle-in-law got my insurance for my car. So the car tags and everything in my car was registered to my uncle-in-law. Okay, it was my car, but it was registered to him. And so I think they were checking that out. And then he finally got out, came up to the car, and when he got up to the car, he said, uh, uh, "Could I see your license or whatever?" Something to that effect. And about that time, the first police officer came by, hollered at the window, and said, "I just stopped him. He's okay." And he said, "Okay, go ahead on." And I left again. This time, I realized that, they knew it was me. It's all over. So I went straight to my former partner's office. We had separated our practice at this time. So I went straight to his office, and he was not there. He was out of town. But I called another one of my law friends, and came straight up. And when he was there, a friend of mine who was a medical doctor came over, examined me. The lawyer was there, and about this time, everybody was talking. A swarm of law enforcement officers came up, and they asked if I was there. The lawyer told them I was, and that I was prepared to turn myself in. So they allowed my lawyer to bring me back over to Oxford, put me on a $100,000 bond. I stayed in jail that night. The following day, because everybody thought that obviously I had a mental breakdown. And I hope you can understand that, because here's this prominent attorney, and all of a sudden robbing a bank. That's just totally unusual. So they took me to the court, and that's when the judge sent me to Dorothea Dixon Mental Hospital for a 6 weeks observation. So that's how that came
Gotcha.
about.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's how
Okay.
it came about that. Okay, so
Yeah.
so you were just right on the precipice. So the third time that they came around, that's when it was you were actually caught for it,
Yeah.
more or less. The first two times they let you go, but then they just were like, he's just having a mental break. It has to be a mental break.
Yeah.
No regular good well off lawyer would do this kind of
Yeah.
thing. Wow, that's yeah, that's so cool. So then, not cool, but that's happenstance, right?
I
It
got
was
you.
meant to happen how it was
Yeah.
supposed to happen. So then you turn yourself in, you go to this mental thing, and then I'm assuming then you're sentenced to the 15. You serve 5. You
Yeah.
come out
I
1986. I'm just
yeah.
trying to fast forward here to make sure we're on the right timeline since we're getting short on time here.
Yeah, you're right. I stayed at the mental. I get it to you pretty quick. I stayed at the mental hospital for 3 weeks. Came out, and I stayed out on bond. Bond was reduced to $10,000. I stayed out on bond from let's see, July, from probably 1st of August all the way up to January. So about 6 months I was out on bond, and of course it was during this time that all of my reflection was taking place while I was in the hospital, my faith kicking in, all the other stuff that I was doing. I no longer wanted to do it. And here I am, ready to go in, preach my initial sermon. The Sunday and the Monday, I went to court, federal court, and was sentenced to 15 years and went in prison. I was fine because I knew that my life was okay. I was going to be fine. I wasn't going to commit any infractions. I was going to come out, and I was going to start my life all over again. That's what I did.
That's incredible. And so you end up only serving 5 years of the 15.
Right.
Was that just for good behavior because you were, or because the sentence was reduced? Or I'm honestly just
No,
curious
no,
how it
no, no, that's
went.
okay. It was obviously for good behavior.
Okay.
And if you, at that time, if you went in and it was good behavior, you could you could be released after a third of your time.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. And so while you were in there, you're obviously a lawyer, very well educated. Other men in there. Were you helping them along the way, or mentoring, or just what kind of things were you doing while you were in for those 5 years?
Well, when I was at Ashland, Kentucky, I worked in the adult education department, working with the instructor there, helping the guys who didn't have any basic education to
Okay.
get their basically adult, And I also worked in the chaplain's office.
Okay.
And so I was, if you were able to check the records, I'm told by my chaplain, and we've been in contact and still in contact. One of the chaplain prison fellowship just came to my retirement. and that's been 2 years ago. That shows you how close we
Wow.
are.
Yeah.
They will tell you that while I was confined, I was at that time the only inmate that they let out on their own. I went to DC. One time I did go with some other inmates, but the last time when I went to DC, they allowed me to fly out and fly back by myself.
Wow. Okay.
It was such it was so unusual until my chaplain told me that they had to tell other inmates that I had to go back to court because, otherwise, it might have been some problems. But because they wanted to know where I was, they said, well, he's going back to court. And that's what happened. I came back. And so my experience, I tell folk, I'll say this to you. I tell people my experience in prison was I don't want to say I enjoy being in prison, so please don't get that impression.
I don't think anyone enjoys it.
But I didn't have a bad prison experience. I tell people now I played tennis. I tell folk that I think my prison experience added 5 years to my life. I worked out, I ate well, I didn't do all the other crazy stuff you couldn't do. So, and I got my whole self together. Now I did. You said that I helped anybody else. I remember one gentleman who was my roommate that I worked with him with trying to get his case and telling him what he needed to do, what have you, and he did all of that. What happened? I left because I went to the camp. So what happened as a result of that with him, I don't know. But that was the only matter because I tried not to I wasn't even interested in a lot of people knowing that I wasn't an attorney
Oh,
when I
okay.
was in, okay? So I
Gotcha.
tried to stay away from that aspect because that could get you into other things you didn't want to get involved
I
in.
hear you.
So
I
I
hear you.
just, yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. No, makes sense. So to go. Okay, so let's fast forward through all this. You come out. It's 1986. You're restarting your life. You're going to seminary. You become a doctor. You're preaching for 32 years. Along the way, you get remarried. My question here is: do you think any of this would have happened had you had children in that first marriage? Do you think your perspective would have shifted
I think
having
so.
children?
I think so.
Okay.
I
Do you think
really
you would
do.
have gotten as far as deep into it had you had children and had to be home like with them or for them and whatnot?
I think your assessment is correct. I think had I had kids at the time, I probably would, because I and like I said, we got don't have a whole lot of time, but see, what you're asking me now is what I've shared with attorneys because see, the North Carolina State Bar allowed me to become a sponsor of continuing legal education. And I did that for 11 years. So I was all over the state talking to lawyers about mental health and substance abuse and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
And I'll say that to them. I'll say, one of the things that you gotta make certain is that you don't allow, anything to consume you. You know, and that if it's consuming you, step back from it. And part of what you say is what are some of the things I would be talking about. Yeah, if I had kids, I'm pretty certain that I wouldn't have been out there, you know, uh, every weekend. And I told Lord, I said with the lawyers when I was talking with them, I said because if your kid wants to, go to your baseball game, your wife like to go out to dinner on this Friday or Saturday, you know, make certain that whatever you're doing don't take you away from those important things
her.
because that's what keeps you grounded. Okay, yeah. So you're on the right track. I agree with you whole 100%.
So more or less, it's important to find those things that keep you grounded when you're not doing the work,
Hmm.
when you're outside of the work, when you're outside of the job, when you're outside of the like the 9 to 5 grind, whatever you're doing, whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you don't
Hmm.
work 9 to 5, maybe it's whatever you're doing, whatever trade or career or profession that you're in. But make sure you find the things that ground you outside of it. Make sure
Right.
you're there for all the things. Make sure there's nothing else that will take you away from what's truly important in life.
I
But I'm
agree.
sure after your reflection and whatnot, you're better off after having experienced all that and then having children, then after.
Sure, sure. I'm happy. I'm very. Life is different. Life, family life is different because I have a different perspective.
And
My total, I see things totally different from back then. But I have friends who are still my friends. One of my best friends knew me when this happened to me. My former partner and I talk at least twice a month or more. We still, all of us still go out to eat together sometimes. Matter of fact, it's been about maybe about 3 weeks ago we were out to eat together. Okay, so I still know them, but they know me as a different person, and I know
yeah,
them as a different person. You
and
understand what I'm saying?
it's just going out to eat now. There's no poker.
That's it. There you go. There you go.
So
That's
if you had to, if you were able to, we're short on we're getting close on time here, but if you were able to summarize kind of what your perspective is now, how would you summarize that?
Well, I have a couple of things I say, and that is let people know that whatever's going on in your life, you need to just confront it. Don't try to hide it. Just confront it. And that is basically accept responsibility. And I just talked to you about, if something is consuming you, like in my case, it was my gambling at that time. I didn't put wife first and all this type of stuff. Step back from it. And I talked about to you earlier about, don't be afraid to fail. And that was where I think I ended up at. I was afraid to fail. And you just got to say sometimes falling is okay if you say, I'm going to get back up. You follow me? So don't be afraid to do that because, that may happen. And just know that you can get up. My mom told me when I came out, she said two things to me. She said, you can go and lie down in the ditch. All folk gonna do is come and kick dirt on you. You can rub your head in the sand, and people just gonna come and rub your head further in the sand. She said, but if you would get up out of the ditch, if you would take your head out of the sand, some of these same folk will give you a helping hand. That was my philosophy. That's what I dealt with. And I tell you, my life has been awesome since 1986. The things I've done, let me just run them down with you quick, and then I leave. Things I've been a moderator of our association with my church, over 42 churches. I've been moderator of moderators for the General Baptist State Convention that consists of over 500,000 members. I am pastor for 32 years at my same church with about 200 membership to about 100 members on a Sunday. I've been president of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance of Durham and Vicinity. Still on the board, still with the HBCU. I served 11 years as a sponsor of CLE for the North Carolina State Bar that people thought would never happen. I was only two disbarred lawyers that did that work for the North Carolina State Bar. I was the African American one, and there was a white guy who was doing it before I started. People thought it would never happen, but I did it. So I know what can be done when you put your head to it, you change your heart, you change your mind. I want to say this to your listeners. Confinement, when we talk about all of this, that will change you. None of that stuff. People can stay 10 years in prison and come out and stay out for a year and still go back. It doesn't help anything. It's what your heart is and what your mind is that's going to make the difference.
Absolutely. And so my very last question here, if you could just hit it real quick for me. Uh, a let's say you have an appointment at church. Someone's saying, I want to go talk to Dr. Smith and talk to the pastor and get some counsel. Let's say it's a young father. Let's say he's about 18 to 22 years old, somewhere in there, super young. He just had his first kid. He's just so young. He doesn't even have hair on his face, peach fuzz. He walks into your office. He sits down with you, and he's just like, Dr. Smith, I don't know what to do here. I just became a dad. I'm 18 to 22 years old. I'm really young. And he's just seeking some kind of counsel. What's one piece of counsel that you would give him?
Well, number one, I would always kind of pray with folks. I would tell them, but when it gets to be certain areas, I will always try to give people toward professional counselor. And as a minister, I could talk spiritual matters, but there are certain things I
Yeah, I
want
mean,
them
like
to.
moral sense. What's some kind of advice that you would give him?
I would say if he's young, I always say this: stay focused and stay ethical.
Love that. Stay focused, stay ethical.
Stay focused and stay ethical. Those are two words that's very important. If you can stay focused and stay ethical, which would entail morals, honesty, and all that kind of thing, you'll be okay in life.
I love that. No, stay honest, stay ethical. That takes you really far. Well, James, this has been just an amazing conversation. I've been truly captivated by your story. I'd even look at my doc or anything that I prepared with the questions, and I love it when that happens, when I just get captivated and so into the story and get to just learn and dive deep into it with you. So I really appreciate you for that. I really appreciate you for being open and for being honest and for sharing your journey or parts of the journey. We only scratched the surface. I'm sure we can go deeper on so many other aspects, especially the last 40 years post confinement and what that's been like. And so, honestly, thank you so much for sharing with me today, sharing with my listeners and diving into it. Your story is truly a powerful reminder that failure isn't final. It's what we do next that defines us. That life that you had, that past life, doesn't define you. That life that you've had in the last 40 years, that's what truly defines you. And the people
Thank
that
you.
you ran with back then that still know you know that. And I just love that you're a living, breathing, walking testimony of what happens when you give your heart, you give your life, you give your mind, your body, spirit, soul, you give everything that you are to the Lord, and you just allow Him to change you. He prepped you for it. He prepped you for this next 40 years by giving you that first bit of time. And he prepped you for that life then after. I think that's just beautiful to see here in this situation and just amazing. And our listeners can truly resonate with that and learn from that. If James's words resonated with you today, make sure to check out his books that we mentioned throughout the podcast. I'll link them below as well, and different ways for you to get in contact with him if you do want to talk to him more. Remember, there's always a way out of the ditch if we're willing to confront our fears and take responsibility for our action. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a message or connect with us on social media. Until next time, take care and keep striving to be the best version of yourself. See you soon, everybody.